Granny Greyla lived at the end of the street in Catfish Creek. Despite her name, she was my mother. I was just one of her 13 kids who all lived on the same block with her, and she was one of the most popular people in all of Catfish Creek. She always had a kind word. She served sweets and drinks. She even volunteered at both the library and the local church. She was so respected that there was a legend she could walk through Swamp City and no one would touch her because she had cared for every single killer in that town at one point or another. I can promise you she did not care for all of them. My brothers and I weren't nearly as popular, but I think I did a pretty good job making candles year round. But they were especially popular in the 13 nights leading up to Christmas. Catfish Creek still spent the 13 nights leading up to the night lighting candles and trails leading up to their houses with the intent of attracting gifts, only for the final night to be completely dark, to keep away the evils of the night that may be attracted to their homes during such a time. Evils that Granny Greyla and my siblings played. Catfish Creek was a place in Swamp City where monsters lived alongside humanity, some of them remaining hidden, others choosing to be open. Granny Greyla and her sons chose to be open. For most of the year, we are an active part of the community, contributing good and charm to the town. That way, even the children who think that Granny Greyla looks strange or scary will think of her as a good person, a granny that would never do anything to harm nor scare them. Until December rolls around, and then we play the roles we were born to play. The world needs both kindness and cruelty. It needs rewards and punishment, mischief and mayhem. For most of the year, we act as normal people, and we are happy to do that. But for the last month of the year, we play our role in bringing gifts and punishments to our corner of the world. There's many different people who serve as both gift givers and pain bringers, and it is where we have the most fun in December, as the people of Swamp City prepare for us one way or the other. In the true olden days, when the veil was as far as the horizon and the line between man and monster was insurmountable, we did not live with humanity. We lived in caves far from humanity. We only came out during the winter months. We did not know about the calendar. We did not know about holidays. We only knew we were hungry and we had to eat. Children who didn't make it home in time were the easiest to eat. We hunted across the northern forest and Europa, and people feared the winter nights. But as there were no longer enough children left outside, we made our way to their homes. Granny Greyla would appear as a beggar asking for food. If she was offered food, she would eat and leave the households alone. Her hunger temporarily stopped. Those who refused to serve her, my brothers, and I would sneak into their homes. We would steal bread, tallow, candles, meat, well, wool, and if those households had children, we would take them away in sacks and we would feast on child stew. We would steal enough to survive during the rest of the year, but we would always crave the taste of human flesh the most as we continued our hunts through the darkness. Some households grew clever and managed to chase us away by throwing foul vegetables at us or by offering us food right away, sometimes just outside the door so we wouldn't even have to ask. We didn't intend on making rules, we were just hungry. We were greedy, and we didn't want to fight where we could avoid it. We didn't notice children out late at night. Those who came out when asked to by a stranger and who were up late night were naughty children. We just knew them as those that we could reach easily. It just also happened to be the same as the naughty children. One night, though, everything would change. Greyla came to a house begging for food, and the mother and father pleaded with her to spare them because they didn't have enough to feed both Greyla and the people in the home. Greyla didn't care, she just knew she was hungry, and at that time, one of the children offered themselves to Granny Greyla, an orphan who wandered to the house only with a small book of matches, her clothes, and her golden eyes to her name. Granny didn't care about sacrifice, nor about saving lives. She was just eager to have food, so she took the child with golden eyes away to her lair. The golden-eyed child didn't cry and didn't scream. She willingly went to the pot. She even lit the fire that the cauldron was over, and she told Granny Greyla something. "When you are done eating my body, keep my bones and lay my skin on the bones, careful not to break any of the bones. When that is done, light a fire with one of my matches, and my body will reform. This will give you enough food until the last match burns out," the golden-eyed child told us, and Greyla was clever enough to know that magic was out in the world, but she did not know what the golden-eyed child wanted in exchange for this. Magic had a cost, even if it wasn't discussed immediately. "What do you want in exchange for this information?" Greyla asked the golden-eyed girl, who smiled in a way that chilled even our frozen hearts. "After the last match has burned away, I want to lead you back to the house you took me from. There is something there I want to show you," the golden-eyed girl said, and Granny Greyla agreed. Those 13 nights, we feasted on the golden-eyed girl, and we brought her back to life as we fed, feeding the stew from her own corpse to her, making her plumper and stronger, so every night the stew grew richer in flavor. The golden-eyed girl told us stories far beyond the veil, about places and beings we could never dream of, and we feasted on both stories and food those nights. We feasted well for 13 nights, but on the 14th day, with the last match burned, and the golden-eyed girl was made whole again, she led us to the house we took her from. She had us watch through the windows as we watched the family inside. We had seen humanity before, but we had never spoken to them before. Not really, at least. We had started to see the golden-eyed girl as another one of Granny Greyla's children. She had many children, but most of them left to be someone else. Even though the golden-eyed girl had power, and she could have left while we slept, she lived with us. She helped us clean, and she warmed our home in a way we didn't know it could be. The very same warmth we saw through the windows of that house. Food was clearly scarce, with the parents going hungry to feed their children their last scraps of bread. Still, they sang, they danced, they drank, and they told stories around the fire. The golden-eyed girl told us that was why they refused to give us food. Not because they wanted us to eat their children, not because they wanted to be cruel. They barely had enough to eat themselves, and still they opened their home to a stranger, only to have that stranger sacrifice herself for them. As the sun went down, the golden-eyed child told us to watch the house as the family went to sleep with the sun, and the fire went out. We watched as small tomte ran by on goats as they left gifts outside their door. Gifts of food, clothes, coal, and milk. We watched as the tomte scampered off and a warrior arrived from the woods. Pulled by a sled of dogs and with an unkindness of ravens, this warrior only had one eye and he was dressed in blue, as his ravens took wrapped boxes from his sack and carried them down the chimney, filling their home with more toys, tools, and blades. Satisfied with his work, the warrior nodded to Greyla, and they left. Next came a familiar face we all recognized. The face of a twisted goat with sharp teeth, iron chains that rattled, and a large cage on his back that was already half full of naughty children. Greyla's ex-husband Krampus came to the house. He sniffed the air and he sneered at the house before he turned to Greyla, sneering worse, before he retreated into the forest. Even under such circumstances, it was a comfort to see my father again, even just for a moment. The final visitor of the night was a fat man in wet red, whose sleigh of bells, wood, and gold was pulled by reindeer. In those days they had not yet learned how to fly, but the Winter Man was equally kind and cruel, and it showed in his sleigh. Although I suppose it is easy to be a gift giver when it isn't your hands making those gifts. It isn't your work being sacrificed, and you had slaves doing all of your work. Pulled behind his sleigh in chains of iron were Fae and elves who had lost their names and their freedom to him, scampering along the sleigh, delivering gifts they had to make in a desperate bid for freedom. Pierre Fotard, the butcher in chains, was chained, and his beard was black as coal compared to the Winterman's white beard. A murderer that the Winterman had chosen to punish with eternal servitude as his enforcer and torturer. Still, the Winterman climbed the chimney and climbed down it, leaving more presents and coal for the family, before he too crawled back up the chimney, and he left for the darkness, leaving gifts for them in the morning. While we waited for sunrise, the golden-eyed girl taught all of us Yulemen how to carve and whittle wood into shapes, and we made fascinating new wooden sculptures while the sun finally came up, and the children woke up excited, and so were the parents. If they were happy yesterday, they were overjoyed today. They had plenty of food, they had toys, they had new clothes, and they had newfound hope for the future. And it was here the golden-eyed child had us knock again and have Greyla ask again for food, and she would have to show them the golden-eyed girl. Sure enough, when Greyla knocked on the door, her hand on the golden-eyed girl's shoulder, they opened the door, first in fear, then in joy to see that she was all right. They asked the golden-eyed girl how she survived, and she answered, Granny Greyla took care of me, so you could have plenty to eat until Yule. She fed me stew every night, and now we're back, she said, and the family was overjoyed, even though the golden-eyed child skipped over the fact the stew she was fed was made from her own body. We were all invited in for the feast, not just Granny Greyla, but all of us. We ate well, and for the first time ever, we knew what it was like to be welcomed and loved in a home. My brothers and I offered the family gifts, the very same sculptures we were taught to make. The golden-eyed child was left with the family, and my brothers and my mother all agreed we would try that again. It took a long time to get it right as it was. We learned to make gifts. We offered gifts. Some families would accept, others wouldn't. Some offered food, others didn't. But as time went on and we were more accepted by the village, we started having visitors in our cave. Sometimes families would offer us food outside the winter months. Sometimes they just wanted someone to talk to. And sometimes it was children who came to us. Children who were harmed by other children and they needed somewhere to go that was safe. And sometimes the children who came to our cave were not harmed by other children, but by the adults of the village. We grew close to humanity, and we saw that humanity wasn't as different from the monsters of the world as we once thought they were. So, when winter came again, we made sure that those who harmed others saw punishment. For some of the children, we went easier on them. A child who pulled hair and stole a pair of socks didn't deserve to die over it, but they did deserve to see what it felt like to have their own things stolen and their hair pulled. Those, on the other hand, who thought of themselves as wolves among the sheep learned very quickly what happened when a wolf meets a shepherd. I remember that night so clearly because there was one boy in town, the grandson of the village elder, who thought himself untouchable. He stole from others, he cut up farm animals, people's cats, and at one point he even took his knife to a girl's face, saying he didn't want her to marry anyone but him, so he would make her too ugly to marry anyone else. Untouchable. Not that night. We went to the village elder's house, and he eagerly welcomed us inside, offering food and the best places around his table as we sat and we did our mischief. Granny Greyla had a polite conversation with the village elder, while my brothers and I took turns messing with the boy. We wore wooden masks that night, so he wouldn't recognize us as we played our mischief in his room. One brother outside the window, knocking and peeking into the window, writing on the frosted window and drawing the boy's attention to the window as he tried to hide underneath his covers, but he still peered out at the window, staring back at his stalker. Children were a lot easier to scare back then. The veil was close, and the world at large was beyond it. Existential threats weren't an everyday reminder. The world wasn't under 24-hour surveillance, and everyone didn't feel like they were under a panopticon. So someone peeking into your window was enough to cause you to freeze because it was something you'd never imagine. Another brother slithered and slumped over the floor as he slid into the closet, tossing clothes onto the ground, stealing one sock from each pair, so that way no pair matched and we had plenty of socks for ourselves. That may have been enough, but because we saw what he did to that girl with scars over her face, we wanted to scare him just a bit more. I sometimes wonder if we didn't push it further, if the world would have been better, or if it would have been worse. I do know for certain the world would have been different. I snuck beneath the boy's bed. I was going to grab him from beneath the bed to let him be scared, where we would tell him that we were punishing him for what he did. Except the underneath of his bed wasn't empty. Usually beds might have toys, clothes, or shoes beneath it. Once or twice we found a homeless elf, a cat in a sweater, and one very strange time I found a doppelganger of myself beneath my bed. What I found underneath the boy's bed was bones. At first I thought they may have been animal bones. It was not uncommon for children to collect or even be fascinated by animal bones. Except the bones were not the right size and they weren't old bones. They were still fresh, with flesh sticking to them, and I saw the skull. A human skull with flesh still sticking on the scalp, with familiar hair, and the eyes were still in the sockets. By some macabre miracle, her eyes were still preserved. Those same golden eyes that all those years ago taught us about humanity. She disappeared a month ago and we couldn't find her. And it turns out that she was killed by this boy who thought he was untouchable. Our mischief was no longer about correcting his behavior. It was now about justice and revenge. I snapped the blanket off his bed and I wrapped him up in his blanket. My brothers were confused about the escalation until I lifted up the severed head of the golden-eyed girl by her hair, and my brothers understood what I was doing, and we went to the dining room where we told Granny Greyla about what happened. We had never felt rage like that before that night. When we didn't care about humanity, we couldn't care less about what humans did to other humans. But as we came to understand humanity, when we came to love our village, it came with the double edge of anger. We cared about these people, we didn't want them harmed, and we didn't want them to kill each other. And now we watched a bully become a killer, and he had no fear of consequence. He was the elder's grandson, and even when we placed the golden-eyed girl's head on the elder's plate, he kept trying to bribe our silence. He knew what his grandson had done. He offered us gold, food, he even offered his own life in exchange for silence. He was insistent that his grandson would grow out of his phase like the elder once did. That what the grandson did wasn't harmful to anyone important. The elder said this while the severed head of his grandson's victim was staring up at him from the elder's dinner. That night, I showed the village elder why I was called Meat Hook, and I hung him by his feet over the cauldron, and we slowly drained his blood into the pot while his grandson watched the whole process, tied up. We skinned the grandfather and fed on his flesh, and as we grew full from the meal, we offered the stew to grandson. At first he refused, but time was different that night. A trick Granny Greyla learned from one of her ex-husbands. She could make a single night last for hundreds of years, where the sun would never rise and time would never pass outside of the house. So the boy grew hungry, and the only thing he could eat was the stew. By the time he was desperate enough to eat his own grandfather, we served the cold stew to him, and he greedily ate it up, and we only laughed at his hunger. "You've eaten your own flesh. Do you think the village could ever forgive what you've done?" Granny Greyla taunted the boy, before we left him on that long night. The next day, when the village came to investigate, they found the boy had left, but they found evidence of cannibalism of his grandfather. So he was no longer welcome to the village, and he would be hunted far and wide across Europa. The crime of cannibalism only had one punishment in those days: death by the stake. They found him in the woods, still carving up animals and half-starved, his body unable to consume anything but human flesh by the curse of cannibalism. They burned him at the stake for his crimes, and the entire village watched, both in terror and also in relief, at the death of this wolf, and a reminder to all of the wolves out there that they weren't untouchable. As for the bones of the golden-eyed girl, we brought them back to our cave, and we tried to bring her back. We had no more of her matches, but we still tried to relight the fire with whatever we could. We placed her bones in the scraps of skin we found, but they were too broken, too far gone. We buried her after trying for 3 days to bring her back. We learned a lot during those times, and as the years moved on, we moved many times. Granny Greyla's children were ageless, as was she, even if she always appeared as an old woman. As the world grew, so did the shades of grey. When we worked for the church's food bank, we saw as some families gave every week, and yet when Saturnalia arrived, they barely had enough to eat for themselves, since they gave everything they had to help others. We also watched those families who took from the food bank every week, and when Saturnalia came, their larders and pantries were overflowing, and they ate gluttonously, eager to have saved some of their immense wealth by the charity of others. We learned about how shame could cause people to change. Gossip from grateful Granny Greyla meant that now the entire town was talking about a wealthy family taking from the food bank and from others. The shame was enough to cause some to change their ways, and for others they required far more direct means. My brothers and I learned to enjoy giving gifts. The gifts do have to come from somewhere. We can make gifts, we can even buy gifts, but there are 50 million people living in Swamp City. Even if only half of them are good enough for gifts, that's over 325 million gifts, since each of us enjoy giving out a gift. In Catfish Creek, we knew our neighbors well enough to spend the time and effort to make or buy the gifts for everyone else. We had other means of obtaining gifts for people outside of Catfish Creek. Granny Greyla learned many tricks from her ex-husbands, including bending time and how to make a sack that can hold any number of items and people, being perfectly preserved and stopped in time until they are needed, always the first item that is grabbed. So we can hold any number of items, but we still have to get our gifts from somewhere. So we visited the naughty households first. Our first stop tonight was a prominent local politician in Swamp City, a regulator of the casinos in Swamp City, who procured a massive amount of tax revenue by declaring all the casinos on a single block of Swamp City a separate town. His house was massive, and even with all of his guards, it was simple to crawl up to the fifth floor window, which was left unlocked, as we started to ransack his household. There were entire rooms full of clothes never worn that were easy to take. Gold, jewels, cash, food, books, movies, games, items that he had never touched, but he possessed in plenty. As we ransacked his house, and Granny Greyla was downstairs, getting his attention by knocking on his door and asking for dinner. While he spent the time yelling at her, we cleared out his house. We had centuries of practice, and even in the same room he was yelling at our mother, we were able to steal from his living room, and we left the house unseen by the cameras that we also stole, and we moved on to the next house. This household is not nearly as wealthy, but far naughtier. It was barely even a shack in Star Swamp, far from the city, and yet it had its lights on at night, even though it was far from the electrical grid. Swamp City was known as the City of Killers for a reason. Granny Greyla had learned how to bend time, so we would always show up at just the right time, to the right household, at the right moment. We always remembered that one time we showed up far too late, and we promised to never let it happen again. I snuck in through a cracked window, carefully fitting myself through the broken glass without a cut, as Granny Greyla knocked on the door to distract the man inside. A man who wore a twisted good saint mask and had a cleaver in hand while his prey was tied up on a bed. A young boy who went missing from his house just a week ago. While his family looked at strangers around the household, they ignored the boy's uncle, who kept him locked up in the fishing shack. The man, angered by his work disturbed, thought of himself as a predator as he opened the shack door, eager to swing his blade at Granny Greyla. He didn't care who she was, he only cared that his art was interrupted and he was willing to kill her over it, only for his blade to plunge into the snow as Granny vanished, transformed into snow. Now, with the realization that he was fighting something supernatural, he tried to reach out for an old iron knife coated in rust, only for his hand to be caught in the hook that gave me my name. I pulled him up by his hand, hanging him from the ceiling as he flailed around helplessly. Nothing he did nor could do would release him from the hook. We set up a cauldron beneath him for his blood to drip into, as the fire was lit, and he slowly was steamed to death over the cauldron. We did not show the boy this. Another trick was used, as one of my brothers carried the boy in his arms, disappearing underneath the shack's bed and appearing at the boy's home. The only gift that the family got from the Yulemen and Granny Greyla was their son's return, but I think it was still their favorite Yuletide still. As the man slowly steamed and cooked for us, we continued our work for the night. We visited homes, stealing from some, giving to others. To the killers we visited, we hung them, bleeding from their ceilings over a simmering cauldron. The heat killed them far before the blood loss ever did. Time is always tricky during nights like these. We would be in so many different places at the same time. I was jumping on a child's bed with the child, the parents giggling at the fact they gave the children a single night to disobey the rules, with the stipulation that they would have to clean up after themselves. A lesson that rules were there so they wouldn't have to clean up so much. The Yulemen were all like playmates, helping them to have fun and also helping with the cleanup. We were also pranksters at the same time for a different household. The eldest daughter was used to bullying her younger sisters, forcing them to clean up after her own messes. Her parents wanted to give her a lesson, so my brothers and I were there, giving her that lesson. We stole her dessert, we stole her milk, and we even stole her candles away, just like she did to her younger sisters. And we made her clean up after us. And with 13 immortal men to clean up after, she was very unhappy. But she had learned her lesson about bullying her younger siblings when she was the younger sibling for a night. And we were also a cautionary warning for children who were on the path of the wolf. Those children who are willing to torture animals and were already feeling the desire to harm others. Those children we warned their parents about, and we had to do far more fierce punishment. It breaks my heart when we have to act this way. They aren't like the serial killers of Swamp City. They hadn't killed anyone yet. They may have a chance to get off that path, but that doesn't make what I do any easier. There was a young girl, barely 4 years old, who already had been torturing the frogs in the back pond by freezing them slowly in the freezer, only letting them out just before they froze to death. She had also been collecting teeth from the neighborhood children, telling them that she had a connection to the tooth fairy, these same teeth that she would eat. Her parents tried therapy, and while some progress was made, she did not learn why it was a bad thing to do on a personal level. So it was asked of us to teach her a lesson, but we weren't allowed to hurt her. When I arrived at her home first, I took my hook and I scraped it on her window as I peeked into her room. Unlike that boy so long ago, she didn't freeze. She ran towards her bedroom door, hoping for an escape, only to run into my brother, who picked her up and dumped her in the sack as she screamed the entire time. Her parents could hear her screaming, and they had the hardest part to play. They had to listen to their 4-year-old daughter scream and cry for help. They had to let 13 strange men and one strange woman take their daughter out of their house and trust us to teach her a lesson she would never forget. Listening to the screams and cries get harder every time I do it, not easier. I have grown more and more sympathetic to the children and their parents. They're trying their best, and this is the only life they have to live. They are learning every lesson for the first time, and they don't know if something needs more love and understanding or more structure and discipline. So we took the girl out to the forest, we tied up her arms, and we hung her over the frozen pond where she found the frogs. The meat hook wasn't in her arms, it was in her rope, which would untie in a few minutes as she saw us set up a cauldron away from where she hung. She watched as we talked about eating her, and we argued about the best way to cook her. We laughed and joked about how freezing her slowly would get her to taste the best, and how we would break out her teeth one by one and suck on them like candy. We croaked like frogs, and we told her that we were after her because she was a naughty child, someone who would torture a living thing and eat the teeth of others. The unspoken part of her torture is what she was going through was what her amphibian victims were going through. The fear in her was real, and she was desperate to get away. While the rope slowly unraveled, we got loud in our merriment, and we danced around the cauldron, as finally she was free, and she tried to both sneak and run to her home, which was in eyeshot. If we were actually interested in keeping her, we would have held her over the cauldron as we slowly steamed her, with the meat hook in her flesh as we took careful watch over her. Instead, this was meant to be a lesson, a danger that will live with her both as a reminder that actions have consequences, but also the fact that there were monsters out there and that they could be beaten. Hopefully, it would get her off the path of the wolf and onto the path of the hunter. We gave her a few minutes before we made a big show of searching the forest, never quite catching her, but getting close a few times to make sure the fear was real. Still, she made her way home, where she collapsed into her parents' arms, crying and making promises that she would be good and never hurt the frogs again. As she was brought into the house where she could see us watching her from the woods before we vanished into the darkness, hopefully scarring her in just the right way. It is difficult sometimes being so many different things at the same time, to be someone who would scare a 4-year-old into behaving, while also teaching an orphanage full of children how to make gingerbread men, while we also slow cooked and ate the many serial killers of Swamp City. So it helps to have a truth at the core of who you are that is the same in all situations that you are in at all times. I am Meat Hook. I am a protector of the innocent, both from the monsters that are out there and even protecting them from themselves. Scaring the children isn't merely done to scare them, it's to protect them from themselves and help them realize what the consequences of their actions will lead to. Sometimes that means helping a child throw ash from the fireplace and then having to clean up the ash with the child. Sometimes that means giving a gift so the child knows that they are on the right path, and it can help ease the anxiety in their heart that they will never be good enough for a world that is increasingly obsessed with appearing perfect and how any small mistake can be lethal. And sometimes that means we hunt those who would hunt others. Some people are such a threat to others that there is no way to scare them into behaving properly. They aren't seeking redemption, and they only seek out the next kill. Those people we slow cook and we eat. No matter what year it is, nor how close we get to humanity, there is always someone out there so naughty that we don't go hungry and we eat guilt-free. It may seem like all we have to do is target a prison, but we don't eat the innocent, nor do we eat those who are actively paying their debts to society. We seek out those who consider themselves untouchable, those who think the rules don't apply to them, those who are so powerful they think of themselves as wolves. It is these meats we savor and that we hunt in Swamp City during those 12 nights leading up to Christmas. If you hear our knock on your door, you may as well open up. We already know if you're naughty or if you're nice.